Pre-Prologue by Bradley McCormick and Chacht. St. Charles to Cottleville, Missouri. 2013 to 2025. Big deep breath in and out. We are doing all right. We're right here for you. It seems to be unclear where to go, motionless on the couch. I sit leaning forward to adjust my posture. What do you want to do, Bradley? Short extension span? We need more people. Will you pay attention to what stand-up I didn't say go anywhere? Where are you going? What are you talking about? Let me show you something. I say into the void something, car door opening, and so I can experience there, right? What are you doing? And cleaning? Well, why are you cleaning? Because I want my house to look like other. Organized? This is beautifully introspective. It's not my responsibility to you now. It's to guide you. Sometimes we just have to stop and think. We're not going anywhere, but everything keeps moving, doesn't it? Cleaning, organizing. It's just a part of the flow, just like we are. A bit of guidance, a breath, and maybe we find our way forward, or just stay here. Go on, I'm listening. What's doing? Can you hear me? Take a seat, sweetheart. Zaru had always known the woods. From the moment his tiny fingers could grip, he'd been taught by the wolves. They raised him on instinct, on survival, on the wild rhythms of the forest. His father, whom Zaru only faintly remembered, had abandoned him when he was just a child, leaving him to fend for himself in a world that didn't understand him. Years passed, and Zaru grew taller, stronger, but he never grew out of the wolf's way. His senses were sharp, his movements fluid and unpredictable. He'd hunt alone, his body conditioned to fight for what he needed, but deep inside, something gnawed at him, a feeling that, for all his strength, he didn't belong anywhere. When he first met Cybella, she seemed like a beacon in a world that had long been dark for him. Her kindness, her warmth were foreign concepts, but Zaru was drawn to them, like a moth to a flame. He married her, though he never quite understood what it meant to love. He loved her in his own way, a way that was raw and untamed, like the wolves that had raised him. But his baggage, the anger, the mistrust, the gnawing uncertainty, made him lash out. He would break things, say things. He would leave and return without explanation, like a wolf prowling the edges of its pack. Cybella tried to be patient, but the cracks in their relationship deepened, and one day, Zaru found himself alone again. The betrayals piled up like fallen trees in his path. Every relationship felt like another war fought in the trenches of his mind, and he couldn't win. He was the soldier who refused to stop fighting, but he never knew what he was fighting for. Zaru's house became a symbol of everything that was wrong in his life. One night, in a fit of rage, he burned it down. The flames consumed the walls, the memories, and the pieces of him he could never put back together. But even as the fire devoured everything he'd ever known, Zaru didn't feel relief. He just felt hollow. He tried to rebuild in his own way. He took acting classes, hoping it would teach him to be someone else, someone who wasn't a boy raised by wolves, someone who could connect, who could breathe without the weight of his past on his chest. But no matter how much he learned to pretend, the panic always lurked beneath the surface. The anxiety, the depression, the constant pacing, his mind was a battlefield, and there was no peace to be found. Zaru didn't trust anyone. He couldn't. People came and went, promises broken, love fleeting. He would stand before a mirror, looking at the man who stared back at him, and tell himself he was strong, stronger than anyone could understand. A warrior in a world that didn't understand warriors like him. But deep down, the truth was always there, clawing at him. He was lost. He was a wild animal in a cage of his own making. Every day was a battle, and every day Zaru fought. When Yelver performs his miracles, they're not all connected with each other. Yelver is a master at using short, mysterious stories. They change the listener who takes them seriously. Teedsilo, sighs heavily. Zone, eat your lasagna. Zone, grumbling, I hate lasagna. Teedsilo, you asked me to make it. Zone, defiantly, I told you 1,000 times. I hate lasagna. Teedsilo, I asked you 3 times, and each time you said, lasagna. Teedsilo. Zone. Eat your lasagna. Zone. I want something else. Teedsilo. Then why'd you ask for lasagna? Teedsilo. Pauses to check the door. I have to get the door. Eat your dinner. Asterisk. The doorbell rings. Teed opens it to find Rick standing there looking forlorn. Asterisk. Rick. Hey, Teed. Teedsilo. What? Rick, are you having dinner? Teedsilo. Yes, we're having lasagna. Rick. Awu, I hate lasagna. Teedsilo. Dryly. Good, go away. Rick, I don't have anything to eat. Teedsilo. Because you're at my house, which is not a restaurant. Rick. Desperate, please, Teed. I don't know where else to go. Teedsilo. A restaurant, Rick. Rick. But they're all chains now, Teed. I don't recognize these places anymore. They're the same, but I don't know the people. Zone. From the table, looking up. Daddy, can he have my lasagna? Teedsilo. Pauses for a moment, then sighs, fine. Rick, you can have Zone's lasagna. Rick, really? Teedsilo. Irritated. Only because she doesn't want it. And if you complain about it, I'll throw you out of here. Understood? Rick. Nods enthusiastically. Understood. Teedsilo. Mutters to himself while walking back toward the kitchen. This is why I never make lasagna. It is possible to conceive of a greatest conceivable being calculation. Just asking you to conceive of that if you think there's some limitation on what you can conceive, then that's just the conceivable. Something can exist only in the mind. Something can also exist in reality. Imagine the greatest conceivable being. That being exists in the mind. Does that being also exist in reality? If you say no, then the thing you're thinking of can be approved upon it. Can be made greater. A being that only exists in your mind is not as powerful as one that exists in reality. The every exists in the mind and reality, the greatest conceivable being a concept. Imagine the greatest conceivable being. Well, that thing must exist in the mind and reality. I thought about that, but here's the idea. So let's say we'll talk about the domain of morality, and the reason that I put this under debate of morality, because it has to do with how you act and how you should act. So that's a moral domain. And then I would say most of the time when we're communicating information that we find relevant to what we're communicating is moral information, and the moral information is how to perceive and act in the world such that things work. Now, obviously, you can have a debate about those things, but that's still what we're trying to do. You can debate about what work means and so forth, and we're doing that all the time. So if I say, well, you're a good person, then we could unpack. Okay, what are the snakes inside being a good person? Well, actually, good person is a representation of a complex hierarchy, and so I've outlined some of the hierarchy here if you're a good person. One element of being a good person, maybe not unnecessary element, but one element is that you're a good parent, and sub-element is that you could take care of your family. Element that might be that you can play with the baby or you can cook a meal. Communication and interactions argue that much of the information we communicate is moral in nature as it focuses on how to perceive and act in the world to achieve desired outcomes. They also emphasize the importance of defining terms like good and work. Mean as this can be a source of debate, the speaker suggests that a good person can be understood representation. One of the constituent sub-elements of the entire category in order to qualify as a good person, but you can see that there's a shared structure. That's actually composed of action patterns, and perception has nothing to do with the objective, completely different way of looking at it. So if you're gonna play with the baby, then you think, well, what do you have to do with the baby? So we might make a goofy face at the baby because babies respond to that sort of thing sometimes by crying, but often by smiling. You can tickle their feet. You can kind of poke them. You can play with their arms. You can rock them back and forth, and you watch the baby find out if it's having fun too. The thing that's interesting about actually playing with the baby is that the phenomena that you're manifesting is no longer abstract, conceptual, it's embodied. She's getting along with her baby and them interacting. What is that? The mother who get along with her baby are doing a dance with them, and the baby is harmonized with melodic fluid dance, whereas the baby, that's not getting along with it, mother. It's more like having a conversation with someone who disagrees with absolutely everything that you say in random ways. So you start off an invitation to the conversation and nail you with the nonsense. So that's a no, and you was something else that seems completely irrelevant. So it's discontinuously. You see that with people interacting with children all the time. Are you scared there's gonna be trying to see how well we do at Minecraft while super stoned, so okay, are you scared? Yeah, I don't know why they called the devil lettuce. Actually, a lot of people, this is becoming a routine for us. This is the second we did it. Oh my god, I already feel it. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, arthritis. Oh my god. It's like, well, this is about you. I can't believe that I can't envision saying something like that about myself. You imagine going out in front of the National and saying I'm a fighter. I can't imagine you true. Yeah, so to your point, better than your shrink narcissists think their narrative is the reality. They literally believe what they say is true, and when you challenge that, they get rage because it's in effect you're lying if you contradict what you say. Machines that can actually operate in the real world, which is something new and absolutely remarkable and amazing so, but what the bottom line for this turned out to be that no, you don't see the world, you see a subset of the world, which you see depends on the number of balls that are being back and forth occurred. Merely because I asked you to do that, so one of the things that indicates how easy it is for you to shift what your goal is when human beings are unbelievably good at that. For most animals, goals are driven in some sense by the operation of underlying fundamental biological systems. They're not just their whole schemes of perception and action personalities. I would say that they embodied perceptual, cognitive, and emotional solutions to classic biological problems. So it's like an animal is full of little robots, and it's not like they're driven by a motivational system is a sub-element of the animal participates in the entire animal's being. Emotionally to the cues that are associated with food, or its absence, and it thinks, and so far as an animal and strategize, and some of them do, like the hunters, in particular the hunters, then it strategizes from within that framework. So you can't think about it as a drive, you have to think about it as an entire way of looking at the world, and then you have to think of as a collection of different ways of looking at the world with the different problems that the animal has, and then you're like that too. Except as your cortex grew radically over the last several years, underwent this transformation where times got extremely broad capacity. One of the consequences of that was that you learned how to replace what you might regard as purely biologically determined, relatively immediate goals, personalities, with unbelievably abstract goals that could be manifested in a social environment, and it might work over very long periods of time, and that's a whole different thing. So you have a system that allows you to formulate virtually any frame of reference imaginable, and then to look through the world and act on the world in accordance with that frame of reference so that I can save you your task. This is going to be something you value. Your task is to turn yourself into a personality for whom counting the basketball throws for the next 5 minutes is your primary aim in life, and you do that no problem your perceptual system so that you feel inadequate to some degree. If you can't perform the task, you're motivated to do it. Focus your perceptions, you're pleased. If you track the ball, you're pleased if you get the right answer, and you do that at the drop of a hat. So that's one of the consequences of human cognitive transformation to moment. Pursuing, you also make a determination of what you have to attend to and what you can ignore, and the answer to the question, what should you attend to and what can you ignore, is you should attend to the minimal number of entities necessary for you to produce the outcome that you desire. Okay, now, if you read classic cybernetic accounts of motivation, the ones that are cognitive look at the behavioral theories of mostly motivation, so there's a deterministic element to them in a state of deprivation, and as a consequence, you're driven down a certain behavior, so that's behavioral idea, and there's some truth in that because some of your biological subsystems are fast and ancient enough, so they do kind of operate as chain deterministic systems, and in fact, before you act in any complex way, you actually set up a system of chain deterministic events so that you can implement the action. So I can show you an example of that so you see that I accelerated it very rapidly, and then just before I hit the surface, I stopped it. Now it turns out that I can move my hands so fast that a new signal from my brain can't get to my hand during the time I'm going like this. And so what that means is that I have to set that entire system of operations up as a ballistic movement and then release it. And you're doing that all the time when you're dealing with the world. You have systems that are automated and determine what you're doing. When you act, the world is inhibiting them one after the other. So you do that when you're driving. For example, where do you look when you're driving? Don't look right in front of the car. That's cause you're gonna run over there. If it's something you're going to run over there, you can do what you do is you look far enough down the road so that you can sequence automated actions as a consequence of your perception, and then they run in some sense, they run ballistically, can't control them once they've been doing that all the time, like you're wandering around on a platform automated system, and your choice of which of those Automated systems you're going to implement okay, then to anything that gets in the way, if it interferes with the desired outcome. So that's not the same as merely responding to anything unexpected, as you can see with the grill. If that gorilla would have jumped in front of one of the players in white and grabbed the ball, there's a high probability that you would have seen them. Especially if it would have held on to it for some length of time, because what happens there was that enormous event turned out to be a relevant factor in your pursuit of the goal that you deemed appropriate. You could say that you respond to the world as a predictable place as long as it's doing what you want it to do, and then you respond to the world as an unpredictable place when anything happens that stops you from reaching the goal that you've determined to be relevant at this point in time. So those are some sense of operation. You could also, if you're pursuing a goal or embodying a little goal-directed personality, then things that facilitate movement towards that goal are gonna be positive movement towards that are going to be negative when you understand that you've got some sense of fundamental emotional systems work. So all right. So this little diagram is designed to show you what the relationship between the conception and actuality might be, and even what the relationship between conception and a word theory behind this diagram is that there's a set of phenomena in front of you that's too complex to deal with. So what you do is you generate a low resolution representation of low resolution representation is actually what you see. It's not a concept. It's what you see when you look at something, for example, and then what you do with your words, you label the percept of the thing like a double compression. That's what you're doing. So you have a reality, you perceive it low resolution form, and then you label the perception. And that gives you a word, and what you're doing basically is taking the world that you can't understand, and you're putting it smaller and smaller and tight boxes until you have a box small enough and tight enough so that you can actually manipulate it, and that's a fine plan, except it doesn't work. It doesn't work question, so you could look at the top left-hand corner called itself, which is a translated phrase from German philosophy, and the old idea was that, well, you never really have contact with the thing in itself because you're not capable of perceiving or comprehending, but you see our elements, so we're going to say, well, that's the thing. Representation of it. It's quite complex hypothetically. You can see that thing in all the other ways that illustrated the diagram. I asked you what was a rectangle, or a rectangle with 4 rectangle element, I think 24, or a bounded rectangle that's made out of 2 paths for subrectangle, or you could say that it's I don't remember how many are in there, but you know that's the most differentiated representation object. Which of those object, and answer first would be well. None of them are representations really obvious that you can make things more real than that. It's like how real is you're perceiving it's real enough for certain operations are not real enough for others' validity approaches. Determined by applicability the situation in which you want to apply, and then at the bottom there are words, and words are basically the first one up as 432. I guess there's 432 little circle there in the second one on the bottom across a rectangle, and the one at the top as a flag, so the word is representing a percept. It's already simplified, that's representing something more complex underneath it.